I ran a small art studio in Oregon. It wasn't anything special, just a quiet space above a row of shops where I mostly taught kids and beginners. Up until then, nothing unusual had ever happened, at least, not until I got that email. One night, I opened a message from someone asking for private lessons. His name was Evan, a guy in his mid-20s. A few days later, he came in for his first lesson. He told me he was a cook and that he had never really drawn before, so I decided to start him off with some basic exercises. I asked him what he wanted to draw the most. He pulled out his phone, showed me a picture of a woman, and said, "I want to draw myself eating her." The moment he said that, I felt a wave of nausea hit me. Maybe it sounds ridiculous, but it wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. The way he looked at me, his tone, his voice. Something about him made my stomach turn instantly. I didn't know what to say. It was just the two of us in the studio, and I realized right away something was seriously wrong with him. I tried to stay calm and said,
"You're here to actually learn how to draw, right?"
He nodded. "Of course. I need to get my face and her face exactly right, as realistic as possible." That was enough for me. I told him I couldn't teach him and asked him to leave. He looked confused, almost offended, and started arguing with me, but after a while, he finally left. I had a pounding headache, and I ended up closing the studio early that day. A few days later, when I came in, I saw a piece of paper lying in front of the door. I picked it up. There was a drawing on it. It was horrifying. A man was tearing into a woman's foot, eating it. The level of detail was disturbing. Exposed bone, blood, everything rendered with unsettling precision. But what shocked me the most was the face of the man in the drawing. It was him, Evan, and then I felt dizzy because the woman in the drawing was me. I dropped the paper and screamed. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. He had taken my photo from online and recreated my face perfectly. What made it even worse was how detailed it was. The thought of him spending hours on it, carefully drawing every part, made my skin crawl. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but my hands were shaking so badly. And at the same time, I wasn't even sure if this was something he could actually be charged for. Either way, the police came. After hearing what happened, they went to see Evan and gave him a serious warning. Thankfully, he never came back to my studio. But that wasn't the end of it. A few months later, I got an email. Without thinking, I opened it and immediately screamed. There was an image attached. It was a drawing of Evan sitting at a table, eating, and on the table was my head. The detail was unbelievable, like it had been done by someone who studied human anatomy extensively. Every muscle, every layer of skin, every vein, drawn in disturbing precision. And underneath it, there was a message. "This is what I always dream about. When I draw things like this and look at them, I feel the happiest and most alive. Evan." I blocked his email immediately and deleted it, but the damage was already done. That experience stayed with me. I ended up deleting everything about me online and moving my studio. Over time, I managed to get back to a normal life. I still teach art, but even now, I still have nightmares. I tried to understand why he was like that, reading about psychology, looking for some kind of explanation, but I never found a clear answer. The only thing I could come up with was that he had some kind of twisted obsession. In psychiatry, it's called paraphilia. Maybe he had urges he couldn't act on in real life, so he expressed them through his drawings. Sometimes, I wonder if he's still out there, doing the same thing. As for me, I just try not to think about him anymore and live my life in peace. So in the middle of the night, I accidentally heard my mom open the front door, and I heard her say,
"I haven't seen you in a long time. Come in and sit."
My mom kept talking, but the problem was that it sounded like she was speaking to someone in front of her. However, there were moments when my mom went quiet and no one responded. I asked myself, is my mom talking on the phone? But if she were on the phone, I would have only heard her voice. I had clearly heard the door open. So I asked myself again, who is my mom talking to? That night, I woke up and left my room, intending to see who she was talking to. I went out and immediately entered the kitchen, pretending I needed to use the bathroom. I opened the door and saw my mom talking to someone, but I couldn't see who it was because they were hidden behind a wall, so I could only see my mom. The moment I stepped out, I saw my mom deep in conversation, but there was no one visible in the living room. I stood there for a brief second, completely shocked. Then my mom said,
Oh, and this is my daughter. She's grown so much. Go and introduce yourself.
I was confused and terrified. I told my mom I needed to use the bathroom because I really had to pee. Then I ran inside and locked the door. I stayed there for about 5 minutes when I heard my mom say,
All right. See you again.
followed by the sound of the door closing. When I opened the bathroom door, I saw that my mom had already gone to bed, so I went straight back to my room. A few days later, I asked my mom about that night, about the person she was talking to. My mom looked confused and said,
What are you talking about?
I tried to remind her, but she insisted it never happened. To this day, my mom has no memory of opening the door for anyone. When I was a kid, I lived in an apartment with my parents and my 2 older brothers. There was a movie theater right near our place, and one of my dad's friends worked there, so we went pretty often. Every time we went, I'd run around all over the place. If I got bored, I'd even just walk home by myself. My mom used to get really annoyed about it, but eventually, she just got used to it. One day, we went to the theater again, and like always, I wandered off and lost track of my mom. After a while, I decided to sneak into one of the theaters. The place was pretty old and kind of run down, so they only showed a few movies, and I'd already seen all of them. I was bored out of my mind. At some point, I ended up dozing off in one of the seats. When I woke up, the theater was completely dark. I was a little confused at first, but I could faintly make out what looked like silhouettes of people's heads down below. So I assumed the power had gone out and didn't think much of it. I was sitting all the way in the back row, so I had a clear view of everything below me. But the moment I stood up and started walking down the steps, I realized something was wrong. The entire theater was empty. I froze for a second, then called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" No answer, just silence. That's when it hit me. I was alone, trapped inside a pitch-black theater. My heart started pounding as I reached out in the dark, feeling around for the exit. I stumbled a few times, bumping into seats and nearly falling down. But eventually, I found the door. Relief hit me for about half a second. Then I realized it was locked. That's when the panic really set in. I started banging on the door, yelling as loud as I could, hoping someone outside would hear me. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then, I heard footsteps. They were coming from somewhere above the seats, behind me. I wasn't alone. The footsteps turned into what sounded like children laughing, and then, just as suddenly, it stopped. That's when I realized the footsteps were getting closer, moving down the rows, toward me. As the sound got louder, I completely lost it. I started screaming and pounding on the door even harder. I even heard my dog barking outside. I shouted for her, calling her name, hoping for anything. And then, for some reason, I felt this overwhelming urge to turn around. So I did, and I swear to God, I saw a woman standing there. She was wearing white. Her long black hair completely covered her face. She walked right past me and disappeared into the wall. I was so terrified I just started praying right there on the spot, and then the theater door suddenly flew open. Light poured in. I ran straight out, grabbed onto my dad's friend, and just broke down crying. Later, when we got home, I told my mom everything. Then she told me that when I disappeared, she just assumed I had already gone home and that she had left with my brothers. Anyway, this was years ago. That theater has been out of business for a long time now, just sitting there, abandoned. But even now, whenever I pass by it, I still get chills, and sometimes, without even realizing it, I find myself walking toward the entrance, like something is pulling me back inside. This happened right after college, when I had just rented a small apartment on my own. Like most people starting out, I didn't have much money, so I was looking for the cheapest place I could find. The apartment was really old, and there was this strange, musty smell that never seemed to go away, but I didn't really have a choice. For the first few weeks, everything was fine, nothing unusual. But then, things started happening. One day, I was sitting on the toilet when suddenly, I couldn't breathe. It felt like the air was being sucked out of the room. I panicked and scrambled out of the bathroom, and the moment I got out, it stopped. I thought maybe there was something wrong with the ventilation, or maybe there just wasn't enough oxygen in there. But everything seemed normal, so I brushed it off, figuring maybe I was just stressed. But it kept happening, and it only ever happened when I was in the bathroom. One day, I was taking a shower when I suddenly heard a noise from the toilet. I turned around and saw the water inside it violently shaking, like someone had just stirred it. But I hadn't touched anything. There was no reason for it to move like that. That's when I started to feel really uneasy. There were days when the bathroom suddenly smelled like something burning, like squid being grilled. Other times, it smelled like blood or something rotting. And on those days, there would always be this sticky liquid on the floor. The toilet paper would be soaked for no reason, and sometimes there were splashes of water on the walls. At that point, I started to think something was seriously wrong with that bathroom, like it was cursed. So eventually, I asked around, found a psychic, and contacted him. A few days later, he came to my apartment. The moment he stepped into the bathroom, his expression changed, like he had just seen something terrible. Then he slowly looked down at the toilet. I followed his gaze, and the water inside had turned red. The psychic flushed it immediately. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I thought maybe I was hallucinating. But the psychic looked straight at me and nodded. After a moment, he told me that this apartment used to be a hideout for a criminal gang, and that in this bathroom there had been multiple cases of torture and murder. Right then, out of nowhere, he suddenly dropped to his knees and screamed,
Please, just let me go!
And then it was like something forced his head down into the toilet. In an instant, his face was shoved into the water. He started thrashing violently. I rushed over to help him, trying to pull him back, but his head felt impossibly heavy, like something was holding him down with incredible force. After struggling for what felt like forever, I finally managed to pull him out. He was coughing, gasping, clearly in pain. Then he told me he couldn't handle this alone, that he would have to bring his master to perform a proper exorcism, and that it would cost a lot. I'll be honest, part of me wondered if he was just trying to scam me, but after everything I had experienced, I didn't know what to think anymore. Even after he left, the strange things in the bathroom didn't stop. One day, while I was showering, I suddenly felt something slam into my ankle. I lost my balance and fell hard onto the floor. With the soap making everything slippery, I hit the tiles so hard. The pain was immediate and intense. I crawled out of the bathroom, still covered in soap, my whole body shaking. I was terrified. At that point, I couldn't stay there anymore. I moved out as soon as I could, basically running away from that place. I tried to look into what had happened in that apartment in the past, but I couldn't find anything. After I left, nothing like that ever happened to me again, and I hope it never will. Even now, I sometimes ask myself if what I experienced back then was real, or if it was all just in my head. But when I think back to what I saw with my own eyes, it's hard to convince myself it wasn't real.